My name is Tejaswini. I'm representing Group 3 in answering the question whether thought is intrinsically social or not. Let's examine the nature of the question. There is an implication which says, which talks about whether thinking is always thinking for some kind of an audience. Does society get to determine what you think, or at least most of it? Why is this question counterintuitive to us? Is because the idea of, we live in the modern world where the idea of individual liberty, freedom and individualism in general are very prevalent roots of what we believe our identity to be rooted in. But let's examine where individualism actually comes from. So the term was coined in 1830 by a French guy called Alexis de Tocqueville, and it was in reference to talking about America and how people in America were sort of exploring ideas of liberty at that time. So essentially individualism is not older than 182 years, which is just the beginning of the modern world as we know it, before which there was hardly any such concept as, individual freedom in the sense that we perceive it now. So have we come to a kind of stratification in which most of us want to be individuals, but we pretty much are the same? So let's examine how much concepts affect, societies affect concepts. The same concept as we have sort of played with here represents different things in different religious groups, and hence has different connotations for everyone depending upon where you come from. And there are different conventions for which each of those social groups have to agree on, and hence the concept is passed down when it is learned through the perspective of these societies. We can see different normatives of marriages and death and several other concepts which are sort of basic fundamental concepts which we build on, which are in themselves much influenced by what society we belong to. But there are shared concepts within societies. So now if, like we have been talking about today, if our inner perceptual views are so different, what makes communication even possible? So what is it that we understand in language? How is it that we form concepts? And the common view is that this happens through the formation of shared concepts, intersubjectivity. So when you hear a word, rather than the definition of it, descriptions of it are going to be essential in your idea of formation of the concept, which means that most descriptions of it are going to come from the society that you belong to, which means that there is always going to be social representation in your mental idea of concepts. So even if percepts are individualistic and we have sort of an inner language of our own, there are still commonalities that we can get to talk about, especially within the construct of societies. So there have been some studies on culture-specific expressions. Here we can see a headhunter's tribe, in which it is commonly believed that if a member of your tribe dies, then you have to kill a member of another tribe as a matter of expressing death. We can even see in some societies that, so for example in Hinduism, they believe in afterlife, which means that it sort of is a euphemistic expression of death itself, because things don't end there. Whereas in some other cultures you see that they celebrate people's passing away into another world. In some other cultures it's mourned greatly and it is unbelievably sad. So a concept which is very, very basic and happens when you're born, you die, but can have extremely diverse connotations depending upon where you come from. They say that half of the people in India and Pakistan would marry without love, but only 2% of the people in Japan would. Plays written and produced in Germany are 3 times as likely to have tragic endings as plays written in America. And nearly a quarter of all Americans say that they are often afraid of saying the wrong things, whereas 65% of Japanese people are afraid of saying the wrong things in Japanese. There was a paper published in the Journal of British Psychology by Brian Parkinson, which talks about how all emotions are social and social development precedes emotional development. So why, looking from the perspective of evolutionary biology, it talks about why we have emotions in the first place is the principle of display rule, which suggests that we have emotions in order to be expressed. So if there is an innate assumption of sociality in the formation of emotions, because a child's face, for example, looks for faces very acutely, but when presented with as complex and randomized things, is not really interested. So we are attuned to finding out what is happening with faces, what are emotions really trying to express. There are 7 emotions that they have called as the basic first primary emotions, including joy, sadness, anger.
That's not true of all the emotions, is it?
I'm saying there are 7 which they call primary, and there are others which they call secondary emotions. And there are some studies conducted about display rules, which means that how you get to present those emotions. And so they had American students and Japanese students, and they were made to watch horror movies. And when they were alone, their expressions of fear were pretty much common, but when they were with other people, Japanese people tended to smile, and so they tried to hide their emotions of fear. So display rules really govern how we get to express our emotions, and so expressions of emotions are also largely culture specific. Vygotsky's social development theory suggests that social interaction precedes development. Consciousness and cognition are the end products of social development and social behavior. So how we get to learn things is by being in a society. And were we alone, we would probably be like Desmond Morris's Naked. So do concepts and thoughts presuppose society? So when you have a thought, does it automatically mean that other people are having thoughts, or that so intuitively it would mean that there is such a thing as a thought which is to be had, which you are having, which other people can also have. So let's look at transitional phenomena. Winnicott's concept of transitional objects in babies suggests that when babies begin to sort of wean off of their mother, so they at about 4 months they realize that their mother is not going to be around all of the time, and so they develop affinity for objects, blankets, teddy bears, and such other things. And it's very common to encounter babies which talk to their teddy bears and pretend their teddy bears to have social identities. And so since these are infant reflexes and these are in themselves social, we can assume that concepts which are formed on the basis of these are also social. The other thing is dialogical theory of self. So self-talk and talking to yourself, even saying that, I am happy for myself, even in such a sentence, the I and the myself act as 2 different entities. So whenever you are referring to yourself, you are already externalizing yourself. So things that you do for yourself are already in an externalized self. So you are creating an audience for yourself, which exists other than your own, which presupposes that there is a society to be taught. So what about arbitrary things such as doodling and practicing for yourself? Do these things at least get to be personal, or do they have to be rooted? So for practicing, it's obvious that social connotation precedes your practice. So if I were to sit at a piano, then I would have to, play things that were played on a piano. Or so then comes the question of doodling. Is doodling private? And there's a funny anecdote about an Indian actor who was signed up for a regional movie. And the scene was that he was waiting for someone to come. And you would think that waiting behavior is pretty much universal. You pace around and look at things and pick something up. And so this guy was made to pluck leaves from a tree and bite them. And the director was like, just bite leaves. And it's very shocking to all of us because we don't even associate with that. So that is how resting behavior, even different, there are differences within that, depending upon where you come from. What about individual creativity? So artists who want to be lonely, who do not want to share their creations, like Van Gogh, who was manic depressive and sold one painting. But we must not forget that he was trying to, all his life, sell paintings. and create his identity through his friendship with Gauguin. And so, besides, the point of a painting lies in its display, which is in itself a social act. What about Kafka, who wrote several things and asked his good friend Max Brod to never ever publish them? Well, just the fact that he had to ask someone to not publish it assumes that it was inherently made for publishing, but he wasn't satisfied with it. So we often encounter in individuals like Alexander Supertramp who want to renounce Thoreau, who want to renounce the society, wander off on their own and try to make things by themselves. But the act of renouncing society is also a social act, because if you did not have society, you could not renounce it. So is thought social? Societies affect our concepts and our learning. Thought presupposes the existence of society. And society is very important for well-being. So hence we conclude that thoughts are intrinsically social. Thank you.
Questions? I want to suggest something that connects two projects. Because there's another project that talks about how emotions are fundamentally displayed. Right? The body is a billboard for emotions. Now, you can see that so here's a line of reasoning you can do, which is that thoughts are fundamentally conditioned by emotions. Emotions are fundamentally displayed, and display is fundamentally social, and therefore thoughts are social, right? By very nature. And so therefore it gives you an argument for why you need to think of sociality, embodiment, emotion, and thinking in one sort of circle of
adding to that, I'd say that there's definitely something more to emotions than the display and expression of it. In the sense that it does get you prepared for a particular situation, at least physiologically and even psychologically. And of course, you just have to look at animals that are not particularly social to see that emotions have a role to play. It's just more basic things.
So just to expand on that a little more, I think there was an emphasis on the behavioral and display content of emotions. The others you must be a little bit more hesitant to use arguments like to renounce society, you need the presence of society, therefore the act of renunciation is social. Because the same kind of specious argument that says that to say, in saying that I don't believe in a God, I am using the term God, therefore there exists God. You see, there is a certain speciousness to that argument.
There's a better argument in their case than in the God.
Yeah,
also sure.
Because belief in God is,
These two arguments are
word
different.
belief is dramatically different from renunciation. That is
I mean, let's put it this way, that there needs to be a belief in God for you to disbelieve in God. And in the same way that there needs to be a presupposition therefore of sociality to.
But you're using this, whether you want to say belief in within brackets God or belief in within brackets society, or you don't want to use
It's not belief, that's what I'm saying. The presupposition plays the role of the belief. Meaning, whether there is God or not, you need to have beliefs in God to have disbeliefs in God. In the same way, the argument would be that, in order for you to renounce society, there must be a tacit sort of acknowledgement that, collective acknowledgement.
So not belief in society or sort of understanding of it, but acknowledgement of its existence, which is completely different.
So that act which says there must be a background against which you are operating is actually not a invalid, I think it's a sounder argument.
I'm just curious to know why you all contrasted social with the individual. Because given the meaning of the word social, I would rather contrast it with natural. What is not social is natural. Why do you contrast social with individual?
That's a social scientist view of social.
Because then the question would be that, our thoughts are the basic building blocks of thinking. In some sense, yes.
Well, since the question was whether thoughts are intrinsically social, I think in
social
itself says
and
that
social would be natural rather than individual.
I think social implies environmental as well as social here, and the contrast is with, so inside the question itself, I think the contrast is with.
But we say that man is a social being. We are saying that is not.
I don't think we're saying it for whether man is a like a natural being. We're not contesting that. We're just saying
sense
that.
of socialize,
Right.
as opposed to XYZ, we're not socialized.
But these are also social beings. Isn't it?
Right.
You're just looking at one connotation of social. You're looking at one connotation of social.
No, I think that contrast, especially let's say between man as a social being and the savage, noble savage, so the Rousseau versus let's say Hume, just to give you a way, is one articulation of what social means. Typically in a biological cognitive setting, when we say cognition is social, we don't mean that. Partly it's a disciplinary understanding of what social is, and I think the cognitive sciences that way hew closer to biology, where social means being with others, not being individuals.
Yeah, my first question is, what is the definition of concept? And how do you define concept? And there are various definitions of concept. So what is your group's definition of concept? And my second question is the act of believing is a part of the act of presupposition?
No, I'm saying believing and presupposition are completely different things, and hence the argument of societal renunciation cannot be matched.
I'm saying in complete form, when you presuppose something, you believe it.
So believing something and believing in its existence are two very different things. I think presupposition is about believing in the existence or acknowledging the existence of something.
Then the knowledge argument is right.
No, he said belief in God, which is different from belief of God.
Belief of God, belief in God, what's the difference?
Belief in God assumes that there is a God in whom you put your trust, and then you don't put your trust because you disbelieve in him. Belief of God acknowledges that there is such a thing, such a concept as God, which is used by some people.
Actually, I think you can give a better response if I may respond. Okay, which is that two very radically different kinds of belief. A presupposition is not a belief at all. In the same, a presupposition has more of the standing, perhaps of a universal grammar or something like that. Your language acquisition device or your grammatical rules are not beliefs. You don't believe. There is no propositional attitude that you have relative to those things. So it's something that is embedded in your cognitive system, which is presupposed by everything else that uses them. So that's one. Therefore, there is no language of belief there. The second is, unlike objects in the world, concepts can be made to exist just by believing in them. Right? So in the sense that once if the concept of unicorns is real, whether you believe in the existence of unicorns or not. So how one makes concepts real is very different potentially from how one makes objects in the world. Right? A mental act can create a concept, which, as far as I know, can't create objects in the world with that.
The whole presentation involves many concepts put together. For example, there was a definition of concept, there was a definition of cultural expression plus culture plus identity plus you even spoke about the creativity. There are a lot of things put together. If you have to think about it, if I can give you a suggestion, we want to use a specific thought which are socially intrinsic or because these are too many things, socially speaking, psychologically speaking, and economically. I mean, there are like too many broad concepts, and if you're trying to put all these together, there will be many more questions that you might have to answer. So if you're think in a specific thing, because many things, for example, Ising's theory about your introvert and extrovert may not have intrinsic, the argument which may not fall into this. Children with autistic spectrum disorders, they have a different world altogether. It's not like they do not share anything, but then they are comfortable within themselves. Persons with schizoid personality disorder, they have their own issues. So if you can think of any one specific thing, then go into that.
We agree, actually, they have too many concepts at a time.
So it's a good point.
Yeah, but these are the things, concept itself is different from philosophy, psychology, or psychology. They are contradicting each other. So we put all the things and we think that concept is embodied in this perspective.
I don't know, I would just say that we are trying to sort of view the question from these three main areas,
Yeah.
which are, so these three points.
All right. Thank you.